Hudson's life was flipped upside down at the youthful age of 22 when he was deceived by his betrothed Mary, only 3 years his senior. Hudson was left feeling disillusioned and unsure about trusting others, especially women. As a result, he became overly critical of potential partners and ended relationships before they could develop over time. Hudson gave up on finding love and accepted his existence as a bachelor. However, Mary arrived in his life, bringing contagious joy and a gorgeous face with freckles. Mary and Hudson occasionally worked in the same building but on different floors, despite Hudson's reputation as a reclusive coder who drank too much coffee. Mary had enjoyed lunch with him, but she expected an entirely different person. She was surprised to see a man wearing spectacles, a shabby jumper, and unkempt hair. Hudson had curling brown hair and charming dimples. Hudson fell in love with Mary and expressed his feelings openly. Mary's charisma drew him in fast, surprising him. After 3 years of dating, the pair married, and Hudson regained faith in the universe. 1 year later, Mary informed Hudson of her promotion, which made him quite pleased. After 10 years of marriage, Hudson and Mary began to feel uneasy with each other, as if one of them didn't belong. It's common for couples to lose interest in each other after years of marriage, and the passionate declarations of love that once seemed so strong had become distant. Hudson was particularly bothered by this. Hudson was experiencing a midlife crisis, which made him hesitant to celebrate his birthday. Carson recommended a surprise party for you. We'll take care of everything. All you have to do is show up. Mary grinned, since the celebration was still 6 months away. Carson agreed to the plan. Since the birthday arrived, Mary remained late at work to prepare. Hudson was troubled by Mary's frequent text messages to someone on her phone, leading him to question whether she was seeing someone else. Despite his efforts to ignore these thoughts, the episode with the runaway exacerbated his concerns. Carson's prior bride created an unseen barrier that hindered his confidence in the relationship. Mary, who had always been close to Carson, did not view him romantically. Carson, an unremarkable man who had never married, quipped that he didn't know the precise number of his children spread over the world. This became a running joke during the weekend. During Hudson's birthday preparations, they would gather and drink together. As Mary and Carson became closer, they saw each other differently. Mary began to see her husband's friend as a more mature and respectable individual. He was well-read and intelligent, and their conversations about art and literature would sometimes last so long that they forgot why they had met in the first place. They met on a car ride and talked about award-nominated films. Mary became so engrossed in her relationship with Carson that she began to question reality. She returned home to her husband and felt a sense of shame and disappointment. Despite her efforts to make amends, her son noticed changes in her behavior but refused to understand the reasons. On Hud's 40th birthday, a surprise party with friends and co-workers took place in a leased flat. The lights were turned down, and everyone took their seats. Mary stood next to Carson, who occasionally touched her arm. She whispered in his ear, "Don't ruin my husband's special evening. I can't just stand here with you." Hudson entered the flat. The lights turned on, and there was clapping and applause. Hudson forced a grin to avoid disappointing everyone around him. He didn't want to upset his loved ones during the celebration. Carson approached Hudson. He was already very drunk and could hardly stand on his feet. All evening, Mary watched Carson carefully to make sure he didn't say anything inappropriate. Carson suddenly appeared in front of her husband, and she was afraid of what he'd do while drunk. He told Hudson about their intimacy and even said he loved him, but you could still smell alcohol on Hudson. He looked at Carson with an indifferent expression and went to the window where he saw his pack of cigarettes still on. The windowsill. Carson's devoted husband felt a mixture of disgust, pain, and anger, and he grinned like an animal as he punched Carson repeatedly Until they were separated, the onlookers stared in bewilderment, waiting for an explanation from at least one of the men. It wasn't until they saw Mary, who was supposed to be by her husband's side, but was instead sitting with Carson and sobbing, that guests began to understand Hudson's friends who knew about his past and the story of his runaway bride were particularly shocked by what had just happened for Hudson. It was the most devastating thing he'd ever experienced. He decided to file for divorce because he couldn't bear to be in the same space as Mary on Monday morning. He stopped his unfaithful wife from returning to their home, leaving her belongings outside. He knew it was wrong, especially since they had a child together, and would eventually have to explain everything. However, he couldn't bring himself to live on the same property as Mary. The mere thought of it made him feel sick. Even before the divorce was official, Mary had already moved in with her lover. She tried to persuade their son to go with her, but surprisingly, he showed he was really grateful that his son was so resilient and preferred to stay with his father. If he'd had to face another betrayal alone, it would have been too much for him. His son's support helped him to keep going. The first argument between Mary and her lover happened after only a month of living together. That's when Mary realized why he'd never been married. He'd been married in the midst after a heated argument. He turned into a real tyrant, resorting to threats and even physical violence in an attempt to gain the upper hand. Mary saw it was a mistake, but it was too late to return to her husband. She had to handle the matter alone while maintaining her sanity.